The lesson from the Hebrew Scriptures this morning comes from the book of Genesis, chapter 11. Now the whole earth had one language and the same words. And as the people migrated from the east, they came upon a plain called Shinar and settled there. And they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves. Otherwise we shall be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth." The Lord came down to see the city and the tower which mortals had built, and God said, "Look, they're one people, they have one language, and this is only the beginning of what they will do. Nothing that they propose to do will now be impossible for them. Come, let's go down and confuse their language so that they will not understand one another's speech." So the Lord scattered them abroad from there over the face of all the earth, and they left off from building the city. Therefore, the tower was called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of all the earth, and from there the Lord scattered them abroad over the face of the earth. And the lesson from the Christian Scriptures comes from Paul's letter to the church at Rome. He says, "Let love be genuine." Pray with me. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, our rock and our redeemer. Amen. The Presbyterian Church USA ordained me to the ministry of the Word and Sacrament on October 13, 1985, which means that the 40th anniversary of my ordination is approaching. In that time, I have preached about 1,600 sermons, and it doesn't take a mathematician or a geriatrician to figure out that the number of sermons remaining to me is finite and shrinking. So before Christmas, I asked myself, what do I want to say to these folk before it's too late? What truths do I want to articulate for them in the time that I have left? And this is what I came up with: a gentle word to an aging empire. And so the sermons between Epiphany and Easter at Kenilworth Union in 2025 will come from Paul's letter to the church at Rome. These words are some of my commonest benedictions with which I conclude many worship services here at Kenilworth Union. Paul says, "Let love be genuine, hate what is evil, hold fast to what is good." Now, this whole passage is Paul's vivid, colorful, detailed but efficient snapshot of what a faithful, virtuous disciple of Jesus looks like. Sometimes they call this passage Paul's Sermon on the Mount. This is what I want you to hear in the early months of 2025. Now, Paul's letter to the church at Rome is his magnum opus. It is his masterpiece. We know more about Paul's essential theology from Romans than we do from the rest of Paul's epistles combined. Now, when he sat down to write it in 57 AD, Paul himself is about 60 years of age, so his time is limited too. In 57 AD, the Roman Empire was at the apex of its strength, the most bristling superpower the world had ever seen. It stretched from Iraq in the east to Spain in the west. The Romans called the Mediterranean Mare Nostrum, our lake. But even at the apex of its strength, Rome is an aging empire. City's already been there for 800 years. And by this time in 57, life is getting harder and harder and coarser and coarser. Nero is the emperor in 57 AD, legendary for his brutality and his ineptitude. In 7 years, in 64 AD, a giant conflagration will engulf the city and burn it to the ground. We don't know if Nero said it, but he certainly didn't stop it. And the metaphor that arises to my mind, unbidden and spontaneously, is that life in an aging empire is arthritic and sclerotic. The joints ache, the arteries wither. Now, I hate to recommend the Gladiator movies to most of you because they're R-rated, they're violent, they're pure Hollywood. Not only that, they're historically inaccurate. But they do give you a nice picture of what life in a blunt, corrupt, arthritic, sclerotic empire looks like. So Paul tells the Christians in Rome how to survive this, how to oppose this, how to be a counterexample of this. Let love be genuine, hate what is evil, hold fast to what is good. And it seems like something we need to hear in America in 2025, right? This country, this empire, will soon be 250 years old. An adolescent by Roman standards, but still it's getting older and it's coarsening, right? Like Rome in 57 AD, America is the world's only superpower. Competitors are emerging, but they're not there yet. So we're the world's policemen. And I wonder what life is like for us in 2025. I've told you before about Jonathan Haidt, the NYU professor who wrote this splendid book called The Anxious Generation. A couple of years ago, he wrote an article for The Atlantic with a striking title. He called it, "Why the Past 10 Years of American Life Have Been Uniquely Stupid." Can you believe the editors at The Atlantic let him get away with that snippy, blunt title? Uniquely stupid, he says. And he says that life in America since 2010, nothing magic about that year, that's just the figure he uses, last 10 years. Life in America since 2010 reminds him of nothing so much as it does of those people who built the Tower of Babel. In 2010, like those folk who built we're reveling in our technological accomplishments, right? We were shrinking the world. We spoke one language. We wanted to communicate better. We wanted to collaborate on projects that all made our lives better. This is the age, after all, of Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Facebook first in 2004, TikTok last in 2016. And these new social media, we told ourselves 10 years ago, would shrink the world and help us understand each other better and communicate more clearly. Things would get better and better. One language. That's not what happened, right? Instead, these social media drove us apart, split us apart. They've been a bane, not a blessing, to our mutual communications and our understanding of each other. Dr. Haidt says something went terribly wrong very suddenly. We are disoriented, unable to speak the same language or to recognize the same truth. It's been clear for quite a while now that red America and blue America are becoming like two different countries wrestling for the same territory with two constitutions, two economies, and two American histories. And this week we're reminded that it's precisely these technical accomplishments that allowed a U.S. Army veteran from Texas to wallow in the mud, malice, and mendacity of the Islamic State and terrorize a great ancient American city. And so Paul writes a gentle word to an aging empire, to the Romans in 57 AD, to the Americans in 2025. Let love be genuine is how he starts. But of course, how else would Paul start? We know Paul. He starts with love. Let love be genuine. It's not very creative. It's not very original. In fact, it's obvious. It's a cliche. It's an adage. It's a bromide. It's a platitude. But if it's so obvious, then why do so few of us practice genuine love? I'm not talking about your love for your family, your parents, your children, your neighbors, your fellow parishioners. That's easy most of the time. It's when we meet somebody we disagree with that love is challenged. And so Paul says, let love be genuine. Let it be real. Let it be thick. Let it be dense. Let it be sturdy. Let it be muscular. Let it be comprehensive. That's the word I want. Let love be comprehensive. Let it spread out. Not some feeble, frail, fragile, flimsy, false phenomenon that will fail you when you meet somebody you disagree with. Love is not love if you reserve it for those people you like, or who look like you, or think like you, or act like you. Love always reaches across the aisle. The Democratic-Republican aisle, the liberal-conservative aisle, the black-white aisle, the male-female aisle, the Bears-Packers aisle, the Wolverines-Buckeyes aisle, the William Blair Northern Trust aisle, the Catholic-Protestant aisle, the Christian-Muslim aisle, the socialist-capitalist aisle. Love reaches across every aisle except for one, and that's the one between good and evil. That's the aisle we can't reach across because we hate what is evil and hold fast to what is good. And every once in a while, somebody gets it right. In 1965, the Plains Baptist Church held a vote on whether to allow black people to join the congregation. The vote was 54-6. 54 opposed, 6 in favor of integration. And of the 6 votes in favor of integration, 5 of them were named Carter, including Jimmy, Rosalind, and Lillian. If it hadn't been for the Carter family, the vote would have been 54-1. After that vote, the Carters set up a Second Baptist Church across town. Ever since Jimmy Carter left the White House in 1981, every single American president and every presidential candidate has stubbornly determined not to be a president like Jimmy Carter. They all want to be the anti-Jimmy Carter, even the Democrats. But I'll bet many, many Americans would love to be a human being like Jimmy Carter. When they left the White House in 1981, they returned to the modest ranch house in Plains that they'd purchased together in 1961, the only house they'd ever owned. And the media are having a blast, pointing out that that house is worth less than a single one of the black armored SUVs that perpetually surrounded it. 44 years. You know what he was doing all that time? He was 56 years old when he left the White House. 44 years of post-presidency. What's he been doing the whole time? Well, famously, he taught Sunday school, right? At Maranatha Baptist Church in Plains. They had to build an overflow room to accommodate the crowds that wanted to hear Jimmy teach the Bible. Sunday school at Maranatha Baptist Church when Jimmy was teaching was like Christmas Eve here at Kenilworth Union Church. Culbertson room full of folk. He mowed the lawn at the church. He built that cross. That's the Carter cross. And when he was finished planing that cross, he continued his deaf carpentry by building homes for the poor. 4,300 of them. He and Rosalind went to war with guinea worm disease. When the Carters started their campaign against this horrible disease in 1986, there were 3.5 global cases. 1986, 3.5 million global cases. Do you know how many cases there were in 2024? 7. I mean 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. He won. When he left the White House, he says, "We upheld the law. We told the truth. We kept the peace." That's quite a legacy. Law, truth, and peace. Not every president can say that. 54-6. He's always reaching across the aisle. Let love be genuine, says St. Paul. It's nothing more than a platitude. But let's do it anyway.